All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christy Puckett Williams, and I am the statewide Campaign for Smart Justice Manager with the ACLU of North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about the carceral state. Hopefully, you'll learn a lot more about the carceral state. What does that mean when we use that term? You'll hear from myself, my colleague Daniel Bose. You'll also hear from my other colleague, and Gaza Laughing House. And we have some special guests tonight, some folks who are what we would like to describe as renegade advocates. And we'll also describe for you all tonight, what does renegade advocacy actually mean? But before we do that, I am going to just get started in talking to you all about the carceral state and what is it and what does it actually look like? And the carceral state, to be quite honest, is all around us. It is everywhere. It is everywhere we turn, everywhere we look. The carcerality is the punishment system that we have in place, but it doesn't just exist in jails and prisons or behind walls or fences with barbed wires. The carceral state exists in everyday places. Our schools are carceral in nature. What's an example of that, you might ask, Christy? Well, if your child doesn't go to school for more than 10 days in the semester, you're going to get a letter from the local district attorney. And the district attorney is going to send your child and yourself into what the school calls truancy court. And so rather than work on the underlying issues of why your child may be missing school, the court will address the parent in a criminal way. And so placing that parent into the carceral state and thereby that child potentially into the carceral state. And so that's just one example. If we look at domestic violence, we can see that the carceral state exists in domestic violence. And how do you mean that, Christy? What does that mean? Well, if you've ever been involved in an intimate partner violent relationship and have had to leave your home, you may have been placed in a shelter. Well, what did the shelter do? It told you when to get up, when to go to bed, who you could have, if you could have visitors, who you talk to on the phone, about what, chores assigned to you. It is very carceral in nature, the way a domestic violence shelter is run. If you look at a treatment facility, whether you're looking at mental health treatment facilities or you're looking at substance use treatment facilities, the controlled access, the not having agency and autonomy over your body is carceral in nature. And so we will be confronting the carceral state through a variety of tactics and strategies to reach the end goal of decarceration. North Carolina uses its resources to control, detain, surveil, and maintain control over people. It exercises control not just over their bodies and their community resources, it relies on things that actually result in people dying inside of the carceral state. And so North Carolina over-relies on the carceral state to achieve what it has never actually achieved, public safety. Daniel, do you want to jump in a little bit and talk about renegade advocacy and how renegade advocacy intersects with the carceral state in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Good to be with everybody tonight. As Christy said, my name is Daniel Bose. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the ACLU of North Carolina. You know, and I can honestly say that I took this position because of the type of renegade that Christy is and that Muffin is, and you know, have seen the come to recognize the carceral state that is all around us. That you know, as Christy said, obviously we think about it in the sense of you know, the traditional criminal justice system, the courts and the prisons, but so much now we see you know, several years ago with immigration, you know, that being undocumented actually became a crime. And so that was a fundamental shift. And you heard people start using the term illegal, and that justified, you know, the most punitive actions you could possibly take, including family separation. You know, we look at just throughout the system, you know, where even in, you know, reproductive health and abortion access, we see, you know, that being criminalized constantly and in various ways, and has a real chance in the future, you know, of being far more criminalized. You know, we see it throughout, you know, in the child welfare system, is in schools. You know, one example I use is even with the anti-trans bills that came up this year, you know, actually making it illegal for medical providers to provide certain types of surgery to young people. And so throughout, what we've seen is the state is just as active and callous and ruthless in pursuing its agenda by maintaining compliance and controlling people, and especially when you're talking about Black, brown, and indigenous people and other marginalized populations, that it's the same sort of patterns that we've seen in the past. The difference is that they justify it through the criminal justice system. And obviously one of the latest examples of this is with Andrew Womble's press conference, where we saw again how it was there was a justification for the killing of a person and the dehumanization of that person. And so I really am excited for this series. As I said before, the very reason I came to the ACLU was to engage in this type of renegade advocacy, and first and foremost, acknowledging the crisis that is all around us, that every day disproportionately impacts and hurts and exploits Black and brown bodies, but is really a concern for everybody, even the most privileged white male individual. If you fall on the wrong side of the state in certain individuals, it can be just as ruthless in destroying your life and making you carry collateral consequences for the rest of that, all the sort of economic consequences. And so again, glad to be a part of this series, and especially glad to spend time talking to Kerwin, Muffin. The picture behind me also includes Grandma Hardy, who is a leader in the National Council and was out there so much during the Vigil. And I'm excited to particularly talk about the Vigil and sort of who are these targets, because one of the other issues about the carceral state and renegade advocacy is acknowledging this is not a partisan thing, that Roy Cooper is as much, if not more of a problem as Speaker Moore. We're talking about A.G. Stein and his role in this, the North Carolina Conference of DAs, acknowledging who are the benefactors and the perpetrators of these harms is key. And so glad to be here with you, Christy.
Well, thank you so much for that, Daniel. And again, we're very glad that Daniel decided to leave his other position and come throw down with us here at the ACLU. And so again, just to highlight for you all what renegade advocacy is, it's a series of tactics and strategies that further our objective of getting our people free and ending the carceral state in all of its forms. And we're going to do that by learning from and with our communities. We're going to collaborate with our partners, but first and foremost, we are going to directly confront those policymakers and law enforcement actors who are upholding the ideals and practices of the carceral state, which include systemic racism, authoritarianism, unrestrained capitalism, and puritanical social influences. Those are the things that we are trying to eradicate from our society so that we can get to that place of public safety where what we hear in the streets, that we've been hearing in the streets of "we keep us safe," we will be able to see "we keeping us safe" actually personified and embodied by the community. And so with that, now I'm gonna bring our special guests, y'all. We have some special guests, and I didn't tell y'all at the top of the hour, at the top of this program, that Daniel, myself, and our guests are actually on the Prison Solidarity Tour right now. There are over 55 prisons in North Carolina, and we are going to every single one of them. We started in April, and we are ending on Juneteenth. And we will end, started out in the Wilmington area, and we have gone across the state, and we will work our way to the western part of the state in the next few days, ending on Juneteenth, where we will have a bailout at the Buncombe County Jail. And on Father's Day, we will be in Durham having a bailout at the Durham County Jail. All right, so let's get ready to bring our special guest that you've all been waiting for. Y'all hear my little drum roll? All right. Muffin and Kerwin, what's going on, y'all? How y'all doing tonight? Take yourselves off mute now.
We're doing good. Hey, y'all.
Hey, everybody.
Thank y'all so much for joining us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to be talking about, the first thing we're going to talk about is the Governor Cooper, the Prison Solidarity Tour, and the Vigil. Daniel, did you want to ask some questions of our guests?
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Muffin, I saw you drive from Durham every day for 58 days to cause a ruckus, at the governor's home, to get in his face, to when he was leaving with his wife out of the gate, to shout at him. Can you talk about why? Why were you out there so much? Why did you sacrifice so much to be out there from sunrise to sunset? What was the point of it all?
The point of it all for me was to bring awareness and to let folks know that we're incarcerated and not incarcerated, that we care, right? And that I did that drive because when I was in that cage, I prayed for a whole lot of things, right? I prayed for somebody to come bail me out. I prayed for somebody to come save me. I prayed for all these things, and it never happened. And so I try to be the person that I was praying for. And so in doing that, that's why I go, because folks that are incarcerated, they don't have the ability to be able to have their voices heard, because most people don't care because they're incarcerated. They say, oh, they did something wrong. They're where they should be. And they forget that they are human, that they are brothers, they are sisters, they are aunts, they're cousins, they're friends. And so I want to put a face to incarceration because I was incarcerated.
And in terms of, would you say that that's what people don't get, is the type of people who are in the criminal justice system? Or like what are a couple things that you would want to educate people about that they just don't, that the average person is not getting about the carceral state?
That we're all just one bad decision away from being where they are. Like, I know there are hella folks who have committed acts of crime that haven't been caught. And that's the only reason why they're not incarcerated, or they haven't had any run-ins with the law enforcement, is because they didn't get caught. So they need to remember, when you want someone locked up, think about if that was your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your grandma. Would you want them to be incarcerated and be in a cage and be away from you? Or would you want someone to have mercy on them and give them another option other than sitting in a cage? Or even if it was yourself, if for whatever reason you made a mistake, would you want to be put in prison? Or would you want someone to give you another chance to say that that was a mistake I made and I don't have to make that same mistake again?
Yeah, thank you, Muffin. Kerwin, you're in some ways everywhere. I see you down in Elizabeth City. You're on the Trek Task Force. It seems like you're. If y'all are in the Raleigh news market, I promise you, Kerwin goes from station to station, delivering the best quotes out there. He doesn't talk in paragraphs like I do and say a lot of ums. That's good. And so, Kerwin, you're in a lot of places, but you took time to show up at the Vigil, and so why, and it was interesting because you were actually serving on the task force to achieve racial equity in the criminal justice system for the governor. And so it was not the easiest thing for you to show up, though, everybody was sacrificing in different ways. But why was it important for you to be out there?
So it is extremely important, and was important for me to be out there and continue to be out there for individuals who are incarcerated. I myself am too justice impacted, justice involved, have did time in the carceral system in North Carolina. So I know what it's like, what it feels like to miss holidays, what it feels like to lose loved ones and can't attend the funeral, what it feels like to see individuals in solitary confinement go crazy. And so a multitude of different things. And so whatever I can do to bring awareness to the injustices that are going on inside the carceral system, to speak to the governor and say, hey, we still standing out here, even though I'm on the task force, I'm still standing in solidarity with those on the inside, and we need you to act for those on the inside. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be that voice that I can be for the people, and continue to help the people in any way possible. And plus, I had great company out there with Muffin. We had a great time while still fighting injustice and bringing awareness to the cause.
Yeah, and in regards to what you were talking about there, it's one of the best things is a sense of community that forms out there. And I just remember, my birthday is coming up tomorrow, Muffin. I don't know if we're gonna have as big a party as we had for you outside the governor's mansion. I was, what was the thing that you were wearing? I don't want to misname it. It was a sash and a what?
I had a sash, a tiara, and a tutu, 3 T's.
Yeah, and so and can you talk about Christy and Muffin? I'll ask y'all both about that. Just the why, like the sense of irreverence, the sense of like having fun in the faith, but while still criticizing, Governor Cooper for what I would liken to a human rights disaster in terms of mass incarceration, the way people are treated. Why did you feel that it was a place for laughter at all? I'll start with Muffin on that one.
Oh, okay. Because you have to find joy in almost anything that you do, because you can't, this is a hard job, right? It's hard, it's stressful, it's disheartening. And if you don't have fun when you can, you will lose your mind, because when you think about all the people that are incarcerated and the things that they have to go through, and they don't have any, sense of joy at all, that's hard to deal with every day. So yeah, you got to have a little bit of fun when you can, just because it's so hard to fight this fight and see people who really just don't give a damn at all. And no matter what you say or do, they're still not going to care. But for the ones who you can change their mind, that's where you find the joy. Because if I can just get one person to see differently a day, then I'm happy. So I want to spread that happiness and not have sorrow all the time.
Yeah, sounds. And Christy, same question. You just sort of what it was, at the Vigil, the community developed there. I've seen, when you were participating in marches in Charlotte last summer, I saw people who you had never met, middle-aged, white women come up to you and say, Christy, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for teaching me so much. And even seeing like the sense of community that sort of is created in the periphery where people aren't in the same physical space. One, can you talk about sort of that community, but also why Governor Cooper? Why was it important that he be confronted by that community?
The sense of community that is created through shared knowledge and shared understanding and shared principles and shared values, it creates a principal struggle, right? That we're all supposed to be in against the oppressive regime that we're living up under, right? So we live under a imperialistic, colonialistic, capitalistic system, right? White supremacist system. And it can be a lot, to Muffin's point. And so we have to be able to find joy. Hope is a practice. That's shout out to Miriam Kaba, who reminds us that when we are doing this transformational work of transforming the world that seeks to harm and punish and transform it into a world that seeks to address the real needs of the people, right? When we do that work, it's important that we remain hopeful and that we remain joyful. And so I too have sat in a cage and languished. And so every day on this side of the wall is going to be a joyful day for me, because I know there are several people, hundreds and millions of people who didn't make it out from that cage. And there are millions who are going to go to bed in that cage tonight. And so I don't have a reason to be sad on this side. I have a reason to be joyful on this side of the wall and to fight and to remind people that our people are not lost. Our people are behind the wall and we coming for them. We coming for them hard. And that's what we're telling Governor Cooper, because at the end of the day, he has spent 36 years building a wall. What is the wall? The wall of mass incarceration that has placed Black people in disparate numbers behind a wall that seeks to punish them with impunity, with state-sanctioned violence. And what we're saying is that harm is historical. There has always been harm in our communities, and there will always be harm in our communities. But we do not have to continue to to embrace that harm by putting harm on other people, thinking that we're going to somehow eradicate harm. Somebody has to say that harm is not the way to address harm. It is not getting us where we said we wanted to be. And so while Governor Cooper was building the wall of mass incarceration through his career as a state representative, as a state senator, as the attorney general, and then as the governor, what we have seen is a violent inaction. So he was actively building up correctional enterprises and making sure that the enslaved people inside of the Department of Public Safety were able to make billions of dollars for the state. He ensured that, but did nothing to ensure that when those people do come home, that they have anything. He has done nothing to address the racial disparities. Creating a task with no force is justice denied, delayed, and is justice denied. And that's what we're saying, that you cannot continue to deny justice. You can't get on TV on May 31st of 2020 and say, let me be clear, Black Lives Matter in a press conference. And when it comes time to show us that Black Lives Matter, we can't find you. We stood out in front of his house for 58 days, and it took him 44 days to give pardons and of clemency to 5 people who were innocent. Nothing to address the racial inequities of the system or the racial disparities, the juveniles, the children who have been incarcerated most of their lives, the people who are on death row who are over 60% Black, right? Convicted by mostly all white juries. You see what I'm saying? And so that's why Governor Cooper is a target, because shit rolls from the top. And that's why he at the top. And so we're going to start at the top and we're going to roll our way down. Excuse my language. I had to say it.
No, thank you. You know, and I'll let y'all behind the scenes of the ACLU for a second. You know, we have consultants telling us that, you know, we need to be Governor Cooper's fishing buddy. And, you know, he wants to do the right thing. He just needs the right circumstance to do it. No, like he's had 36 years and his instincts are bad on this. And I think if there's anything that I would want to convey is that, you know, the carceral state that you see built up around you is the most bipartisan thing you can imagine. And so, you know, and you know, it takes no courage to build cages. What it really takes courage to do is to move in a different direction and to do things better. And so, you know, and that we'll see which, you know, elected leaders step up for that. I can tell you right now, not many have so far. Can I turn back to Kerwin for a second and talk about a little bit where Governor Cooper did set up a task force, and you are on that task force. You were the, I guess I would ask you sort of what you feel your role is there, why you were included, and then what you've seen. You know, what y'all been working for a year, y'all came out with recommendations. You know, that is a policy discussion. That is sort of the nitty gritty of it. Can you tell us the good and bad of what you've seen?
Yeah, so my role there is I'm in the justice involved seat. So they needed individuals who was justice impacted to really sit at the table. And though I wanted more justice involved individuals at the table, because it's nothing like lived experience versus going to college and learning book knowledge about the carceral system. When you live through something, you know how it operates through and through, the bad parts of it, the good parts of it. And so more justice involved individuals sitting at the table will ensure that more justice involved individuals coming behind them have a seat at the table, but also will continue to eradicate what's going on inside the carceral state. But the things we have done on the task force, some of the good things are dealing with, such as use of force, making sure that individuals who perpetrate bad acts against people inside the carceral system, but also law enforcement officers across the state are being held accountable. But we need bipartisan support. And so that is one of the downfalls of some of these things that I was looking at and looking into. You have to have support from across the aisle. And some things the governor can't enact with just a stroke of the pen. And, you know, I expect him to enact them with just a stroke of the pen and really uplift some of these recommendations that he can, because he created this task force, after all, to combat systemic racism within the criminal justice system, not just the carceral system, but law enforcement, the criminal justice system across the whole, right? But a lot of the things that I'm seeing now are bipartisan politic games. And so we know that the criminal justice system right now is a hot topic, and it look cool to be progressive and to speak to be progressive, but we need actions and people being progressive. It's the actions that will really define somebody's character and their term in office. And so these are the things that we're looking for. And so it is a bunch of recommendations that came out for in lieu of arrest for individuals going through the criminal justice system who can't pay fines and fees, but it takes a multitude of stakeholders to buy into these things. And so it is a lot of different associations that came out, like the Conference of DAs, the Police Benevolence Association, the Sheriff's Association. And it's just a host of them that really came out and was like stood in direct opposition to some of the recommendations that was put out. And this will be one of the biggest barriers to really getting this pushed through, some of these recommendations really put into laws and policies. Why? Because a lot of these associations back these different candidates, right? And so we must really look at what association is backing who candidacy and really put in their juice and power behind these individuals, because this is how you're going to see who controls who. So you have to follow the money at the end of the day. And so we know if this association is saying, hey, I don't want this in there, I want to keep SROs in school, which we know funnels the school to prison pipeline, then guess what? The SROs are going to stay in there. Why? Because you got certain individuals who are backed by these people. They're not going to budge because these are the people that really funded them and are backing them. And so we must really dissect what's going on behind the scenes. And so I was just privy to, and still is, what's going on behind the scenes and who are really the dynamic and power pieces and players within this institution, and continue to uphold systemic racism in this institution. And so it's just about identifying these players and really coming at ways to say, okay, how can we get through to these players? And if not get through to these players, remove these players out of the way totally, so we can really see what reimagining public safety look like in a carceral system that's not built on, taking down a carceral system that's built on systemic racism, but really doing away with that whole system and really creating something that's just and equitable for the people and not just one particular group of individuals, but we're talking about all marginalized people. And so that's kind of what we've been doing on the task force. You could go to the website and really look up, because it was a lot of recommendations. It was a lot of hard work put into it. And so I don't want to see that hard work and time wasted. And so what we're saying is, if these recommendations could be turned into policies and laws and enacted by the governor, by all means, Governor Cooper, go ahead and enact them. And so what we say is we stand by individuals' records of what they're doing, their actions, and not just somebody saying one thing, because it sounds good, right? But while you're saying a great soundbite, people in the carceral system are still suffering. So we need actions that really help back up the sound bites. And so this is what we're saying, and this is what renegade advocacy look like, is just taking the approach to say, you know what, now it's not just about saying it, it's about you actually doing it, and we're gonna hold you accountable to doing it because you said this. And even if you don't say it, we're gonna hold you accountable to do it, because right is right and wrong is wrong. And so at this point, it's about what side of history do you want to stand on? So you gotta take a stand.
Yeah.
Right. And Daniel, I would add to that, to what Kerwin just said about, you know, it's not just about the state of incarcerated people. We are all interconnected. So as long as there are people who are existing in a cage, who are languishing, being tortured by inhumane and cruel practices, then we are all at risk for that. That is the point, that until they are free, none of us are free. This is a collective struggle for collective liberation, because we are all toiling under the same oppressions that they are. They're just pushed out and disappeared more than we are, right? And so this is really not just about the incarcerated people, it's about all of us. What do we want as a society? Someone asked in the questions I see, and he said, well, how do you want to maintain order? By giving people the resources that they need to be orderly. See, I was orderly when I had what I needed. I was disorderly when I didn't have nothing what I needed, right? And so if I had housing, if I had a safe house, not full of abuse, if I had access to medical care and a doctor who actually saw me as a human and as someone to treat and to care for, not just a body, a Black body that's annoying them by coming into their office and seeking treatment. If I actually had education that was accessible to me, if I had jobs that paid me not just filling a seat, but actually paying me based on my skills and seeing me as a whole person, because we still, women, only make 77 cents to the dollar that the men make. And just so you understand Black people's plight in life about wealth, for every dollar that a white person has, Black people have 10 cents, okay? So we are doing a lot with the little, and we are still showing up and being resilient despite. And so that is why everyone should be interested in our collective fight, because we will all get to what we want, to this society that takes care and looks after one another. What we saw, Daniel, last year during the protests, that what you described, people coming up to me and all of that, that wasn't the most beautiful part. I would say the most beautiful part, to answer Don's question, was to say out at jail support in front of the Mecklenburg County Jail for over 100 days, providing 24-hour assistance and care to people, not just people coming out of the jail, but all poor and marginalized people who walk by jail support were able to have a hot meal, clothing, a ride, telephone, a cigarette if they needed it, birth control, emergency contraceptive. I mean, anything a person needed was at jail support. We had there for them for over 100 days before it was dismantled by law enforcement, when over 43 people were attacked for peacefully providing care to the community. So when you want to ask what does law and order look like, I would suggest that you ask law enforcement, what does law and order look like? Because it's when they come around that law and order is disrupted.
I agree. And whew.
Any comments there, Muffin, or just an emotional oof?
So what does law and order look like, right? I'm agreeing 110% with what Christy said. But with the person that asked that question, what does law and order look like to you? If someone broke into your home and they only broke your window, is putting them in jail going to fix your window, or having them be able to have the money to pay to get your window fixed? Would that make you whole again? Putting them in jail is not going to get your window fixed. You still going to be out the money out of your own pocket to get your window fixed or have your insurance paid for. You're going to have to pay that deductible. There's this thing called the harm-free zone that people do. I've done it myself. My car was hit. I asked the young man to pay my $500 deductible. And I didn't ask him to pay it all at one time. It took him 2 years to pay that $500 deductible. But guess what? He paid it. And he didn't have to go to jail and spend even more money being in jail, because he would have had to bond out and pay more money, or he wouldn't have paid any money and sat in jail and lost his house, his car, and everything else. So that's what law and order looks like to me. People being held accountable without being put into a cage, without being abused. That's what law and order should look like for everyone.
Thank you. And you know, Christy was talking earlier about what that sort of power and control looks like. And I heard you years ago, Christy, talk about, you know, your background is in and your education is in domestic violence. And so, you know, that very looks like the violence and control wheel. And when you go through that, as we were doing the other day, and you see all the mechanisms, you know, that the state uses, whether it's electronic surveillance, you know, incapacitation, termination of parental rights. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could go through every spoke on the power control wheel and could insert the police, law enforcement, the carceral state. So when it says intimidating, denying, blaming, obfuscation, financial abuse, fees and fines, right? When the police lie, deny. I mean, obfuscation is when you wear a body cam and then don't want to release it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the illusion of transparency, but you ain't really transparent, right? That's the obfuscation, where it's like, I'm giving you the illusion of caring and loving you and really wanting law and order, when it's really about putting your ass in that cage so we can continue to make the money that the state needs. Because again, the bodies are commodities in this carceral state. If it didn't make dollars and cents, they wouldn't be doing it, y'all. Okay. And so, like, we have to understand that there is also a financial component of the carceral state. In order for the state to maintain its control, it has to have money. And Black and brown bodies and poor bodies in cages represent money to the carceral state. Just one division of correctional enterprises last year, the laundry division, made over $1 billion. And that's because they sell the incarcerated people's labor around the world to France and to other countries. And so incarcerated people make all kinds of things, paint. They make the DOT signs that you see, license plates, furniture, baskets. If you retire, Daniel, from the state, what you gonna get? That nice big old plaque made by incarcerated people. I wonder in COVID, do the incarcerated women still clean Governor Cooper's mansion? I'm not sure, but I bet you they still working at 1-800-VISIT North Carolina as travel tourist guides via telephone. So again, the state has a vested interest in keeping people in cages, and you have to understand that they're looking for a return on their investment. And so that's why people are continued to be locked up despite the data. Because everywhere else we use data. COVID, we would not have gotten anywhere if we didn't use data. But when it comes to the criminal legal system, they don't want to use no data. They don't want data. They don't want transparency. They don't want accountability. They want to just be able to say we're trying to do better without actually proving that they're doing better. They're spending more and more each year. It's just getting worse. And we, the renegade advocates, are going to be there to tell the truth. Now, people might get upset with us, but what we're going to advise them is to be upset with what we're saying as being true, not the fact that we said it. Be mad that it's true. Don't be mad because we said it, right? And if you are the target of our criticisms and our critiques, do better. That's your only option.
Because people's lives matter. I mean, you know, and yeah.
Especially incarcerated people's lives.
In a few minutes, we're gonna bring in Gaza to talk about how people can become involved in this renegade advocacy. But I want to circle back a little bit to, you know, as you said, the vigil was 58 days from November 4th until January 1st, because it didn't matter who had been elected governor in the election. What we wanted to confront Governor Cooper on was the fact that despite there being tens of thousands, mostly Black people in prison in a system that he built over 36 years, you know, that he had failed to use his clemency power, which he can use that to release people early. He could use that to compensate people who had been wrongfully convicted or otherwise, you know, were innocent, and had failed to use that for his entire first term. And so that was why we were standing out there and confronting him on that. And, you know, there was some relief at the end of that. So I'm hoping that one, someone can talk about the relief that was provided, but more importantly, you know, to circle back to the fact that the vigil never ends, you know, and if you want to look at the vigil, I put the link at decarceratenownc.com. You know, it's powerful. It's about 15 minutes, captures a lot of amazing stuff out there. But at the end of the day, the vigil never ends. And so we've taken on the road. As you said, Christy, you know, we went to 5 more prisons today. We're going to all 58. We will have gone to all 58 by Saturday. And, you know, as we're doing this, you know, the main thing is to stand in solidarity. So I'm hoping somebody can talk about, you know, Muffin, earlier you were talking about how, what does law and order look like in the current system? What it looks like is warehousing and dehumanizing people. And so, you know, can you talk about the importance of solidarity in that context? And then I'm hoping that, Kerwin, you can talk about, you know, we were at Birdie a couple weeks ago, and you called it Gladiator School. You know, just sort of talk about, you know, what that looks like. But can I start with you, Muffin, on just sort of like the dehumanization that you see?
So anybody who knows me knows that when people use the word inmate to call someone who's incarcerated, it gets up under my skin, because that's one of the things that guards would call us, as opposed to calling us by our names. That was a way for them to dehumanize us, that we weren't even worthy of being called our name that was given to us by our families, right? So that's why that bothers me now when I'm free and I hear people address folks in that manner. No, you have to remember, they are still a human, whether they are incarcerated or not, whether they did do something wrong or they didn't do something wrong. Because we have a lot of folks who are incarcerated who didn't do what they're accused of doing, but they're innocent and they're still incarcerated. And when people say, well, what are we supposed to do with folks? Like Chris said, give them everything that they need. People need not just a livable wage, they need a wage where they can thrive, where they can have savings. Someone posed a question the other day on Facebook and was like, what would you do if you and everyone you knew didn't have a paycheck for the next 2 months? And you know, people said a lot of things like, oh, you know, I got a savings, I got this, I got that. Mine was, I would commit a crime and I ain't even going front. If it comes to my kids eating, having a place to stay, having clothes on their back, if I can't have the money, then guess what? I'm going to do something that is illegal to make sure I take care of my kids. People don't wake up and say, oh, I'm gonna commit a crime today. People wake up and say, I'm going to survive today. I'm going to make sure that when my daughter or my loved one looks at me, they know that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they have what they need. But if we as a society gave people what they need, as opposed to taking away the things that they need, we would have less crime. Crime is at the intersectionality of food, housing, clothing, education. If you're lacking any of those things, a crime is going to be committed eventually. And mental health services. A crime is going to be committed eventually because you're lacking one of those 5 things, or you might be lacking all 5. So remind yourself, people who commit a crime, who get arrested, who are incarcerated, they're still human. Look at them as if they're one of your family members. And how would you want your family member to be treated? Because you know your family member, you know that they're a good person, but they just came across hard times. And you know that about that person, but society doesn't know that about that person. So think about that when you think about the people that are incarcerated. What if that was my brother in there, or that was my sister in there? I know my sister's a good person, but I don't know how she will react if she couldn't live in her house. She go to put her key in the door and it doesn't work. Or she go to get in her car and it's been repossessed. Or state sanctioned kidnapping has happened because she was working double shifts and the state came and took her kids and said she couldn't provide for her kids, so they took them. They'd rather give foster parents money to take care of kids as opposed to giving the actual parents the tools and the things that they need to take care of their kids.
Which is a clear example of the carceral state, right?
Go ahead, Carol.
So what Gladiator School is, a place that is so dismal and devoid of hope. It is a place of horror. It is a place of violence. And when I say violence, I mean perpetrated from the top down. So when I first was processing, my first act of violence that I seen there less than 15 minutes of being inside of a prison system, was I seen one of the guards tell one of the guys to strip. And so they made everybody strip naked in front of each other. There's dehumanization of individuals. And so when one guy refused, he was punched in the face and knocked out. And so I immediately began to take off my clothes then after I seen that, because I knew and understand that violence would be perpetrated against you if you didn't commit these type of things that they demanded of you. And so violence is king in there. And that's why I say that that is Gladiator School in some places, in some facilities, because it really is. And you might not make it out, not for fear of losing your life from somebody else who in the carceral system, but from one of the staff. And just seeing cover-ups of individuals being actually beating to death and it being classified as a suicide. And knowing that since I was in these people's house, essentially in the carceral system, that I couldn't speak out. Why? Because they control all forms of communication, right? So who am I going to tell the guards to say something? Am I going to mail a letter out? Guess what? It go to the mail room. They got control of that. Am I going to call somebody? Guess what? They shut the phones off. You can't call nobody for a week, 2-3 weeks. And then guess what? Once you get it out, your family member report it, or you give it to your family member and they report it, they're going to report it to who? They're going to report it to the same system. So you can't expect them to police themselves, right? So this is how cover-ups are done and what I've seen in there. And so this is why I call this Gladiator School, because violence is at the top and violence is king, and it's no resources for the individuals that are in this oppressive place, right? It's really no reformative resources that are in there for long-term commitment. And when I say that if we look at different models from around the country, one of them being Virginia. Virginia has the lowest recidivism rate in the country, right? Recidivism meaning like the cycle the individual are going to go in the carceral system and come back. And so we look at these models. Why are we not doing these models here in North Carolina, right? Why? If this state has the lowest recidivism rate in the country, why are we not using the same practices that these people are using in this state? And so it's all about money at the end of the day. But why I call it Gladiator School, because violence was and still is king in these institutions, and it start from the top down. And of course, these institutions are isolated. And what I mean by isolated, I mean that somebody from Raleigh, as we call it, somebody within the DPS system or higher up can come in, but when they come in, guess what? Everything is covered up, right? Everything is covered up, so everything's gonna look intact and in place. And guess what? When they come in, they want everything to be covered up. Why? Because they don't want to have to turn around and report it. So it's like, don't let me see it, so I don't have to report it. I know what's going on, because guess what? I was a captain in here for 30 years. I just made it up the chain of command, but I don't want to report it, so don't let me see it. And that's kind of what runs amok in there. And so violence truly is king. It is a lack of resources in there. And we need to be asking individuals who are in position of power within DPS, why are we not utilizing the models that Virginia are utilizing inside their carceral systems to really stop the recidivism rate of people coming back? And so we know that if we stop people from coming back, guess what? They start closing prisons down. They start losing money. And is that what they really want? So at the end of the day, we really got to think about how it's all tied together collectively, and really look at economics. Follow the money. You want to do something, follow the money.
Yeah, thank you, Kerwin. And hearing y'all speak, it's clear why, for something like 50 of 58 prisons, I've seen you stick, lean out the window and yell at the top of your lungs, sometimes with a bullhorn. We see you, we love you, and other radical displays of love. And to see how, when people are actually out on the yard, how strongly they react to that. But, the sad part is in places where you're talking about, like Birdie or Pass Baton, like we're not seeing anybody, because those are, the windows are small slits. The lockdown is virtually all day. And so even where we try to show solidarity in those places, it doesn't actually reach it, though, we've taken more other actions, like sending in letters in the fall when COVID was rushing through the prisons, telling people that we care, we hear them, no matter that it seems like the Department of Public Safety and the governor had left them behind, to face a deadly disease alone. But again, it's been a real honor to travel with y'all on this prison solidarity tour. And anything else y'all want to say before we move on to bring in Ngaza and talk about how people can become engaged in this effort and movement? Anything else, Kerwin or Muffin? No? All right. Well, thank y'all very much. Really appreciate it. So we're going to bring in Ngaza Laughinghouse now, who is our field manager at the ACLU of North Carolina. We spent a lot of time talking about the carceral state today, because I think it is, that's where sort of in this renegade advocacy campaign, a lot of things, it starts with education. And so we spent a lot of time talking about, what is a carceral state? What are examples of how we, of how Governor Cooper is a part of that, for example, and then how he was confronted. But this is an ongoing effort. And so really glad to have Ngaza here to talk about how regular people can become involved. And let me just sort of stick with this framing of Governor Cooper, for example, where, despite TREC, we saw that the Department of Public Safety still introduced the same problematic carceral bills that they had in years past. For example, House Bill 560 was introduced and has already passed the House and is now going to the Senate, that would provide mandatory minimums, take away all discretion from a judge. If an individual exposes their genitalia in prison, that's 6 months added to their sentence. That same bill also limited due process rights for individuals, where if the prison system loses something like a wedding ring or a family Bible, something personal, individuals lost a lot of ability to reach that and to get that property back. And so we still see Governor Cooper continuing down the same path in terms of how his agencies are acting. And so a lot of this, there's a conversation at the legislature about this. And I know that you've been a part of that Ngaza. And one of the things that you've been leading is an effort to take the energy that we see in the streets and the ideas and the bold proposals and confront legislators with it in real time as they're making decisions, because the disconnect between the legislature right now, and even the governor, and what's happening in communities is extreme. So can you talk about, one, if you could introduce yourself, and guys, in your own words, and then two, talk about what you've seen at the legislature and why it's important for people to be there.
Yeah, most definitely. Appreciate it, Daniel. So my name is Ngaza Laughinghouse. I'm an organizer and attorney at ACLU, working as the field manager. And in this time of the legislative, we've seen legislators dealing with big decisions that impact Black and brown working folks and even poor white people too. But there's rarely any of us in the room when these decisions are being made. So the idea behind it is that we leave our communities and go to the legislature where anybody can walk in at and talk to them face to face, tell them what we like, encourage them when they do something that we like, but also let them know when there's something that we don't like. And this is just a part of what we do. So if you're an organizer, you're an activist, you're an everyday person out here, this is just one part of some of the things that you can help us do. So for instance, when we're in there, there's oftentimes two types of legislators that we end up meeting with. Some of the more moderate ones and some of the more progressive ones. And the moderate ones are the ones that seem to think that what they're doing is good enough, that we should just be happy with the things that they've done. They're helping us defend against bad bills. So what more do you want? And they're a little surprised when we tell them that we not only want to play defense, we want to play offense. We want to get some progressive things advanced. And it's wild in situations like that, because these more moderate legislators, they're taken aback when we come up with strong, bold proposals and demands like that. But they always tell us that, well, and guys, y'all just got to get people to vote. You just register people to vote. That's all it takes right there. But the problem is that people voted for them and they're in there now. So what are they doing now to advance progressive bills? So even though we push them like that, at the end, they still hear it and still respect it, because they oftentimes come back to me in the hallways and comment on the groups of community members that came up the week before, a couple of weeks before that. And on the flip side, oftentimes we meet with more progressive legislators and we encourage them to keep going, but we ask, as they file progressive bills, why is it that the rest of their party or their members aren't also co-sponsoring those bills? And it's so crazy to think that oftentimes when we talk to these other members, they say I also support those concerns. I want police accountability too. But the question is, well, why didn't you co-sponsor and put your name on bills that are uplifting the same demands that you purport to support as well? So as we ask those questions, you can oftentimes see the legislators sit back. Their eyes will kind of glisten and they feel really just a sense of satisfaction and happiness. People are seeing what they're doing, but also realizing that there's a problem when everybody isn't supporting that same piece of legislation. So one of the responses that we often get is that the more moderate legislators have to see their constituents organized, because we know the elected officials respond to consequences, and they know they will feel consequences if their community members are organized. So that's where our work is coming in right now. And if anybody wants to join too, I encourage you to come. I'm there at least once or twice a week. We're serving as a bridge, taking individuals and community groups into the legislature. So just sign the intake form. Any Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm happy to have you. I'll be there with you.
Awesome. Yeah, and guys, serving as a bridge like that is there's an incredible need for that. And so, in the email follow-up, we will have an intake sheet if you would like to come to the legislature. And Gaza, as he said, is there 2 days a week, and it's happening now. I mean, this is happening, and it's been happening for the last few weeks. You'll be there at least through July in Gaza, and the legislative session may go until August. But this is an incredible opportunity, and so please sign up, and if you're interested in that. I mean, guys, I hope you'll stick around with us to take some question and answers. Or some questions and provide answers as we go through them. Christy, do you have a first question you want to pose?
Sure, let me bring, I don't know if Muff and Kerwin are.
Oh yeah, please.
They're still there, but yeah, they were just sitting back. So the first question is from Dawn, the executive director of Emancipate NC, where Kerwin is a staff member and where I am a proud board member. Share a moment, y'all, when you saw your work manifest in the people that you've impacted. Share a moment when you saw your work. I would say, for me, I'm just gonna say Ronnie Long. When I saw Ronnie Long come out to the Vigil, watching him come out of the prison doors, I was there on August 20th of 2020 when he came out, August 28th. Watching him come out the doors was amazing, but watching him come out to the vigil, and he donated to the bail fund, y'all. And this was a man who still had not received the financial relief from the state yet, but he understood that freedom was not free and understood that people had made sacrifices, lots of sacrifices, so that he could be free, and he was returning the favor. And so I think that's probably one of my most proud moments. What about you, Muffin, Kerwin, and Ngaza?
I get a proud moment almost every day that I get to bail people out of them cages, and just to see the happiness on their face. And a lot of folks I bail out are homeless. And even though people say, oh, they should want to be in jail because at least they got a place to sleep and they got food. No, they want to be free. And seeing them with that smile on their face because they free and they didn't know how long they were going to be incarcerated, that's like a happy moment for me every day. That's why I get up every day and enjoy paying into the system that I so much want to abolish, is because, you know, Harriet Tubman freed slaves until they abolished slavery.
Yeah.
So I'm going to folks out until they abolish money bail.
Wow. So one of those moments for me was recently, and I have them all the time, but like recently it was a little guy, about the age of 5 or 6 years old, little black boy with a bullhorn, and his mother was like, my son want to meet you. So I go over there and I meet him, and she was like, say it for him. And so I'm waiting, I'm thinking he's gonna say, you know, not really knowing what he's gonna say. And he started hitting the chant. He started saying the chant that I be saying: people power, economic power, and some of the words he really couldn't even pronounce, but just having the idea of the concepts: political power, revolutionary power. And I knew at that moment he didn't understand fully what he was saying, but one day he would. And just putting that spark of light in him, and for him to repeat them words, knew that I was passing along to the next generation. And we was creating many revolutionaries to really continue to work on and pass the torch down, because we're gonna get old. And so that was one of those moments for me.
That's beautiful. And Ngaza, do you have a moment you want to share with us?
Yeah, I do. So I'm thinking back to last year when the protests were happening, and a lot of times you see protests like that, you see these spontaneous reaction from everyday people who oftentimes, when everything is said and done, they go back to their regular lives because there's nobody around to pull them into actual organizations. But I think last year we saw the opposite of that in Raleigh, in the Triad area, and other places too, where people came out in strong shows of support and fighting against police violence. But even after that, they stuck around. They joined political organizations that's been working ever since then. So anytime I see people who are doing political work, who are joining organizations and getting active in those organizations, because we know there's no such thing as power if people aren't organized. Even the weakest, dumbest politicians in the world can rise to huge heights because they have organizations that are pushing them up like that. And on the flip side, we have to be organized too, because our enemies are always organized. So we have to be just as organized. So in the past, you're seeing these organizations form and develop and stick around now, create a whole wave that's being seen across the state. Is my proudest moment.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And so someone asked, and this is going to be our last question before we wrap up. Are there ways to disengage with the carceral state in our daily lives and show resistance to it? I have my favorite saying, but I'll save it so everybody else tells their answer. How do you resist the carceral state in your day-to-day life? Muffin, Kerwin, and Ngaza, and Daniel.
Okay.
Go, Daniel.
You know, I mean, I will say that, you know, after, you know, everybody you see on the screen has been doing this work for years. And so, you know, and with a lot less sort of notoriety. And so, you know, there have been small victories over the decade. I give a lot of credit to a lot of people for that. But, you know, actually maximizing the impact of that relief that has been achieved. So I think of like fines and fees and trying to, you know, when you go into traffic court and just understanding how many people are about to be charged $200-300 that they can't afford, and then put into a spiral of not having a driver's license for the next 20 years. And so, you know, we have been able to develop a form and put it out there. And so just going there and spending time saying, you know, you can't afford a fee, here's the form that you would need to complete to ask the court to waive it. You know, that's something that that is a concrete to do. And there's a lot of things like that that we're going to talk about on the Renegade Advocacy series to really connect the problem to a small, concrete way that regular people can engage locally.
Thank you, Daniel. Kerwin, Muff, and Gaza, anything y'all want to add briefly?
How do I disengage? I don't think I ever disengage from the work because my mind is constantly always thinking about
No,
it.
not disengage from the work.
Oh, okay.
How do you disengage the carceral system? How do you not engage within the carceral system every day, sister? Like, how can a person kill a cop in their head? How do you do
that? You go on Facebook jail like me.
How do people do that in real action?
Oh, I don't know. They got to get them on the bus.
And Gaza, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I don't know that you can disengage this carceral state that surrounds us all over the place. Sometimes you don't have a choice to disengage or remove yourself from. You have to engage it. You have to resist it. And at some point too, that raises the question of we have to stop supporting institutions and politicians that refuse to boldly stand against this carceral state. So we can't be at the point now we just accept lip service. We take photo ops, we have pictures and feel good when the governor or somebody else responds to us and meets to us. We can't just continue to do voter registration drives, registering people to vote for politicians that don't care enough to take a bold stand for our issues. We've been talking about this carceral state for how long? Yet this legislative session, what has been issued or proposed or passed that addresses our concerns? So when we're talking about disengagement, there's no such thing as disengaging with something disengaged that hasn't disengaged you. We got to engage with it. The question is, what are we going to support? And when are we going to draw a line in the sand?
Thank you so much for that, Angaza. Thank you to Muffin and Kerwin for joining us tonight. Thank you, Angaza, for joining Daniel and I tonight. Daniel, we've come to the end of our hour. We have held the people for one entire hour. Our next event is called Addressing the Toxic Roles of the District Attorneys. Y'all, this is gonna be good. It's gonna be my favorite because I sat in that cage because of a district attorney, y'all. I was put into the cage because of a district attorney. And so it is gonna be my joy to talk about the role that the district attorney plays in all of this, because it's not just Governor Cooper. Governor Cooper is a single actor in an entire system. And so we're going to break down the roles of all the actors in the criminal legal system. And that will be on July 21st, save the date. And we will make sure that you get that information. We will also follow up via email on Monday with more information where we will be able to forecast for you all a range of future action opportunities and immediate processes for signing up for working with Angaza. Also, I'll be with Angaza in July at the legislature. So you'll be seeing Angaza. You can see me, come chill with us. Daniel will be there some days. Muffin and Kerwin might be there some days. You never know who you're going to see when you come up at the legislature. So sign up for that. And also make sure that you sign up for the local DA event that we will be having. And yes, Don, the DA is the most powerful person in the criminal legal system. And you can also come see us before the General Assembly. The People's March, Black Voters Matter, is having their freedom rides this week, next week, and they will be stopping in Raleigh. And so check out our website and our social media so that you can get more information, or you can always email me, kwilliams@acluofnc.org, and I will send you that information. I will be tabling. Come see me at the table, get you some nice swag. I got Black Voters Matter swag. I got ACLU swag. I got it all. So come see me. And Daniel, do you have anything you want to add and say to the people before we sign off?
No, glad to be here with y'all and glad to go through this series. And again, like, you know, part of it is fierce truth, but it's also about not just, you know, yelling at people to be yelling. It's about, you know, using, being willing to basically, you know, have impacted people speak directly to decision makers at particular junctures in the decision-making process. And that is our sort of our best idea for how to change the system. And I've already seen it sort of paying off. So excited for the people who are already doing this work and for the ones that are going to start doing it. So thank y'all.
Again, thank you so much, Katie. I just put it in the chat, but my email again is kwilliams@acluofnc.org. And again, we will remind you of the next events. Thank you all. Have a good night.